Hello, everybody. I am sitting here with a medical professional. If you could go ahead and say your name, profession, and how long you've been in it.
All right. My name is Dennis Stewart, and I've been a nurse since 1995. It's 2020 now, so it's 25 years that I've been in the medical profession. I was a RN from 95 until 2016. And in 2016, I got my nurse practitioner certification. So I've been practicing as a provider, as a nurse practitioner, um, since 2016. So for the last 4 years.
And you were, did you practice medicine in the military service, right? How long were you doing that?
No, I was in the infantry.
Oh, okay.
For the Marine Corps.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So, cool. Well, thank you for your service.
Of course.
Could you tell me, do you feel that the ACA, otherwise known as Obamacare, if it's had a positive, negative, or a mixed impact on your industry,
Healthcare.
on healthcare? Yeah.
I would say it's probably had a mixed result in healthcare in general. I think a lot of times, obviously the government makes a big difference in healthcare because of Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicare kind of sets the standards by which other insurance companies bill and pay for insurance or for healthcare. But the ACA, I think it was meant to get more people on insurance, and so in that way, I think it's probably good at kind of eliminating the pre-existing conditions, which is kind of difficult to do on private insurance because they need to make money, and the ACA kind of supplements that with government funds, I guess. But as far as like day to day, what happens in healthcare, I would say not much changed. And part of that is as a healthcare worker or provider, and because I work for the hospital, I don't run my own business or do those things where I would be more kind of in touch with the financial side of healthcare. What people pay or don't pay as far as healthcare is concerned doesn't really matter to me. If somebody comes into somebody's homeless and they come into the emergency room, we give them healthcare. They probably won't pay, so it makes a difference to the hospital, but it doesn't really make that much difference to me. If you can kind of understand that. It makes a difference to the hospital because they then have to charge somebody else more to get reimbursed for the care that is given for no reimbursement, and so they charge insurance companies and what they can charge the government. With like Medicare doesn't usually pay as well as private health insurance, and so because of that, getting people onto insurance is probably a good thing. The more people that have insurance and are able to pay, theoretically, should bring the cost of healthcare down. I don't think it has, not significantly. If you've been paying your healthcare premiums since then, they've still been going up. So it was supposed to bring the cost of healthcare down. I guess you could argue that maybe it would have been higher without it, but I don't know that there's any evidence of that. So in that way, I would say it's mixed because I don't think it's accomplished that. Politically, I don't know if it was actually aimed to fix healthcare or just be a step toward single payer government healthcare. Um, so if we ever go to a single payer system, which doesn't seem that unlikely to me,
Mm-hmm.
I think that too will be probably mixed, in that it'll have uh, you probably have more access to care as far as like the average person, but if there's only one person paying, then um, they can kind of dictate the rules. Medicare already does that to a great extent with healthcare. There's only so much that they're going to pay, and what it costs doesn't really matter. They're just going to pay what they're going to pay. Um, it's one of the I've always said healthcare is kind of unlike any other business, especially in America, because we have mandatory laws. So the homeless guy that I was talking about that comes to the emergency room, he comes to the emergency room. We have to give care. Doesn't matter if that care is $500 or $5,000. We're going to give that care that he needs to survive and to not necessarily to flourish, because you're giving emergency care.
Right.
But that in so in the hospital may not be reimbursed for that at all. And then Joe that comes off the street that has insurance, or let's say he doesn't have insurance, he's supposed to be a private pay or whatever. We still have to give him care. If he doesn't pay, they'll send it to collections or whatever. But I don't know the percentage of people that pay versus people that don't pay. I've heard from some hospital executives that the ACA has helped and that it has given more people insurance, so therefore more people are paying. But I also have experience with friends and people that I know that had insurance that were mostly, I think, people that are like private businessmen that didn't have insurance through their employer but had to buy their own insurance. Those types of people. My friend had his insurance that was, I don't remember how much it was, a few $100s a month. When after the ACA, it went up by, it was ridiculously a lot higher, because he had to buy more insurance, because they wouldn't allow kind of a catastrophic insurance program. They wanted more things covered. So he couldn't buy the cheap insurance. He had to buy more expensive insurance. So then he actually went off insurance for a while. It was cheaper for him to pay the fine that the ACA had, especially since they weren't going to do the fine for the first few years. So he had no insurance for a while because of the ACA. So again, it's a mixed result. I think I said toward the beginning, I don't have anything to do with the finances of healthcare as a provider, or as a nurse or as a provider. I don't really have much to do with the finances of it. As a provider, I know that I can bill for services. So when I write my note, there's a possibility that the hospital will get reimbursed for my time. But that's a little different than when I was a nurse. But when I was a nurse, it's just kind of included in the cost of your hospital room, the wages and stuff for nurses. But because I have nothing to do with the finances, the day-to-day kind of experience of healthcare from a healthcare worker's perspective hasn't really changed. And I don't know how how much it would change one way or the other almost doesn't really matter what the government does. Um, so when you have the question about, you know, has Trump done anything to make healthcare better or worse from a healthcare perspective? Again, it doesn't make that much difference. What happens in Washington doesn't make that much difference to my day to day work. And I mean, I think it can make a difference long term. You know, if things become, you know, financially insolvent or whatever for hospitals, and the regulation that is placed on hospitals and healthcare organizations, those things can make a difference. But it doesn't. But it, you know, from day to day, you don't really notice much difference.
Okay. Well, have you noticed that things like pre-screenings, if they have gone up or down or no change, like things for pre-screenings for like breast cancer or stuff like that? Anything?
Again, I work in the hospital and I work in acute care, so my education for nurse practitioner was family practice, and there's a lot of people that I know that are doing family practice, and so they would probably be able to give you a better idea of whether that's actually gone up or down. But as far as what I've witnessed, I don't know. I don't know whether it's improved that.
Okay, so if you noticed in regards to pre-existing conditions, I know you touched on it a little bit, but are you seeing more people insured or less people insured or covered, or what's your experience with pre-existing conditions?
Well, at least theoretically, the ACA provides, it makes it a law that health insurance companies and obviously the government has to cover pre-existing conditions. And so, and that's, you know, that's one of the more popular things of the ACA. And I think probably, you know, when we're talking about the mixture of good and bad that the ACA does, that's probably one of the good things, in that it you know, allows for people with pre-existing conditions to be covered. The you know, kind of the market forces and the economics of pre-existing conditions are that if one health insurance company is going to cover pre-existing conditions and another one is not, then the one that doesn't cover pre-existing conditions is going to be better off because they're not taking on patients that have known illness already. It's like when you're buying life insurance, you're going to they give you a physical, and if you do well in the physical and you don't have any hypertension or you don't smoke or those types of things, then your insurance premium is going to be lower because they can cover you more easily and still make money. Mm-hmm. But the insurance premium is going to be higher if you have the pre-existing conditions, and the ACA allows, it kind of spreads that apart, you know, across the population, at least in theory, which allows, you know, everyone to kind of pay the same premium instead of, if you have you could probably get health insurance before the ACA if you had a pre-existing condition, but your insurance premium would be a lot higher. So I think that by mandating that everybody does it, that helps to, at least in theory, bring the premiums down. But I mean, I see a lot of people with pre-existing conditions, and again, I don't know how much of it is insured and how much of it is, you know, private pay or not going to pay, and yeah, so I guess that.
All right, so have you seen, in terms of like costs, have costs gone like up or down, or what do you think the driving thing of that is for costs?
Cost for healthcare or cost for insurance?
Cost for healthcare, well, cost for premiums, I guess, is
Well, my experience on that is that my premium for the healthcare insurance that I purchased through my employer, um, for my family has gone up pretty much every year. It goes up. Um, I just fill out my benefits package for next year, and it went up again. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so I think that's one of the when we were talking earlier about kind of the mixed bag of the ACA. Uh, Part of the thing that it was supposed to do, at least in rhetoric, was that it was supposed to bring the cost of healthcare down, and I don't think that it succeeded in doing that. Um, and the cost of healthcare premiums was supposed to go down. Um, but I don't think that it succeeded in doing that because they just keep going up.
And you are someone with a pre-existing condition, right? Technically.
I am now, yeah.
Yeah.
With the diabetes diagnosis, I technically have a pre-existing condition. So
Um, so yeah, so like trying to remember what the other thing was we touched on earlier before the recording cut out on me.
recording difficulties.
Yeah, and I had to start it. You were talking about how like the ACA affecting your work, like
Um, how it does or doesn't affect my
how
work.
how it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ACA, in theory at least, provides for more people to have insurance, and therefore there are more people that are able to pay for the care that they receive, which is helpful for the hospitals that I work for. So it's helpful to me in that way, I guess. But as far as the day-to-day process of healthcare, it doesn't make that much difference to me who's paying, whether they're being paid for by Medicare, whether they're being paid for by private health insurance, whether they're being paid for by insurance that's covered by the ACA, or whether they're not paying at all. I pretty much give the same care.
How would you rate care in the United States versus Europe? I know you were talking about that a little bit.
Um, I mean, I obviously haven't experienced European healthcare or Canadian healthcare. I've heard things about it. Um, I know I've done some studying in my graduate work, and so there's a lot of different systems of providing healthcare for citizenry that countries around the world have. Some better, some worse, and outcomes. I know I've read things that the outcome of Norway, which pays like an eighth of the amount per person on healthcare that we pay in the United States, is about the same or better than our healthcare. But I think that a lot of that has to do with the lifestyle of the country more than it has to do with their healthcare system. Because if you don't get sick, in other words, you maintain your health by eating right, exercise, all those things. Pre-screenings, like you talked about, those are important for kind of maintaining health in a population. But when it comes to acute care, I don't think there's anywhere that's probably better than the U.S. If you want to get cardiac care, if you want to get open heart surgery, if you want to get a heart catheterization, if you want to get cancer treatment, then there's probably nowhere better to get it than the United States. I think we tend to have a little bit more innovation than a lot of other countries, probably because of all the amount of money that we have. But the population as a whole probably doesn't do a great job of maintaining their own health. processed foods and
Mm-hmm.
sit in front of televisions a lot,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so those things don't help the overall outcome of mortality within our country. But we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for healthcare generally because our healthcare is not, rationed by a committee. It's not rationed by the government, but it's more rationed by the market and who has health insurance and who doesn't have health insurance, or who can pay and who can't pay. That's tends to be how we ration our healthcare.
So in terms of access, that better care that you were talking about, do you feel like it's only accessible by people who are well off, or not?
Well, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of wealth. You have to have. I do think that there's probably there's people that are wealthy that can afford to pay whatever. There are people that have health insurance that can pay, and then the very poor that have Medicaid or some kind of government program can pay. But there's kind of the working poor, people that are kind of in the lower middle class that don't have insurance, people that are like self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
Those people tend to be kind of left out of our system because it's hard for them to hard for them to access it because of cost.
So do you feel like do you see more of those people, like since the ACA has been implemented, that you're seeing more of those type of people coming in, or is it still kind of the same crowd?
I think it's pretty much the same crowd, same people that are coming in. I don't notice, and I don't know what it was before our recording glitch or after, but I talked about my friend who's self-employed and he lost his insurance because of the ACA.
Yeah, touch on that again because it was after.
And he had to buy more expensive healthcare because the ACA kind of had a demand of everything that the healthcare had to cover. And before, when he was self-employed, and he had health insurance, but it was just catastrophic health insurance. So if something really bad happened to him, it would pay. But he had a huge deductible, I don't know, $5,000 or something. And so it wasn't going to bankrupt him if he had something happen to him, but he also didn't. He also had to pay out of pocket for just general things or smaller things. And he and his family have utilized my assistance on several occasions because they didn't want to pay for a doctor visit or something like that. And so they would be one of those people that kind of slides through the cracks, and the ACA didn't help him at all because the plan that they wanted him to pay was so expensive that he couldn't afford it. So it didn't really help.
So what is something that you think would improve?
I think probably the most important thing to do to improve healthcare in the United States is to bring in market forces. Like I said before, healthcare is not like any other business that I can think of. And I'm not sure that it should be like another business, but I do think that utilizing market forces does help to bring costs down. I mean, it helps in other things. So,
Like innovation.
Yeah, it helps with innovation. It helps with bringing costs down. But I know, but people have to have kind of a vested interest in getting kind of quality healthcare for a less expensive price, for us to get the costs down. Because right now, the insurance company pays for it, so the insurance company is the actual consumer. Not you're a consumer of the insurance company, not of healthcare. You're separated. There's the healthcare provider and the hospital, and then there's the insurance company that pays the hospital, and then you pay for the insurance. So I think you could you could bring costs down by bringing competition into the insurance market, having each person paying for their own insurance as opposed to, and having a wide variety of choices of insurance might help, because then there would be a market there'd be market forces on the insurance companies themselves. And the other thing is to have, maybe more high deductible plans where we have HSAs, or health savings accounts that, help people to bring in, to have their own vested interest in what healthcare costs. I, since we're talking about experiences, I know that when I worked in the emergency room, it really ticked off a lot of people. But to me, I thought, well, it's kind of logical in that there was a patient and she was on Medicaid, so she was, lower socioeconomic class, and she came into the hospital by ambulance, so the most expensive way to get to the hospital. And the ambulance company was going to get paid because of Medicaid. They do pay for ambulances. And so she came in by ambulance, the most expensive. She went to the emergency room, and really the only reason that she was there was she needed to know whether she was pregnant or not. She was complaining of cramping. That was her complaint. But what she really wanted was to know whether she was pregnant or not. And so a lot of the nurses that I was working with were so upset because, she could have gone to the dollar store, bought a home pregnancy test for $2, maybe $4 or $5. I don't know what they cost now. She could have gotten a home pregnancy test for a few bucks and would have gotten the same information. I said, but economically, the economic forces that are at work here, why would she do that, which is going to cost her $4 or $5, plus she's got to get there and so forth, when she could call an ambulance, have them come in here to the emergency room, and she could get a pregnancy test, and she's going to pay $0 out of pocket for that. So that's a $500, I don't know, at least a $500 pregnancy test to our system, but for her, it's $0. So the incentive for her is to do it that way. Now that's kind of an extreme case, but it's a true case. I saw it.
Indicative of human behavior, free versus
yes, free versus having to pay whatever.
And effort.
We might think $5 no big deal, but she's pretty poor. So, but she's not dumb,
Yeah.
and so, and that's what I mean by everyone needs to have some skin in the game. So to me, even if you're very poor, if you come to the emergency room, you need to pay something. It doesn't have to be a lot. I don't think we need to fleece the poor, but they should pay $5, whatever, something that they could afford, but would be kind of a disincentive to them abusing the system.
So maybe like some sort of like improvement to the system might be some sort of like, all right, you're in this demographic, so you should at least pay this,
right,
and so forth.
And that's why I like systems where I saw one system when I was in school, and it was the system for Singapore, and they have government run healthcare. In other words, they have actual government run hospitals, so the government pays for those hospitals to exist, and if you're a citizen of Singapore, you can go to those hospitals, but it's going to cost you something, even to go to the government hospital. But they also have mandatory, and this is, I don't know if it would even work in our system, because they have a mandatory HSA. So sort of like you get taxed in their paycheck. It's going to come out, it's going to go into a health savings account, but it's for them.
Mm.
So it's their money, and
Mhm.
it stays with under their name. It's not like Social Security where it's just kind of a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
But so it's their money. It stays there, and they know that that's their money. And so when they choose to use a hospital, they can use the government subsidized hospitals, or they can go to a private hospital that might have a little bit more innovation, might be a little nicer, might there might be a reason to go to that hospital as opposed to this hospital. But they, as the healthcare consumer, can look at that and say, do I want to go to this one, which is cheaper, but maybe maybe it doesn't give as good a care. It's going to give McDonald's care, or do I want to go over here to the Shea, which gives really great care, but it's going to cost me more. So I've got a mandatory HSA, so there's funds there available for me if I've been working, that allow me to make that decision for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I like about that is it includes some of the safety net of government subsidized and so forth healthcare, but it brings in some market forces, and I think there's smarter people than me that understand the economics of it.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think that we could come up with something that would include both the safety net and the economic forces to improve our system, but so far it seems like the two parties in our country just want either government controlled healthcare or just insurance controlled healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think either one's. I mean, like I said earlier in the interview, when you asked about premiums, my premiums keep going up every year, and so do everybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, alone in that, and
Right.
and the cost of healthcare just keeps going up and up, and it can't do that forever and have people being able to access it. So we do need to make changes to it. I just don't know, I don't know whether we have the political will or innovation,
Mm.
to do what we need to do that.
But you would want to see a system that implements more of the individual, like having the ability to make decisions than to go to like a committee or some
Yes.
bureaucrat.
Yeah, I kind of loathe the idea of. I mean, I feel like the bureaucrats already have too much control in our healthcare system as it is. Bureaucrats being either the healthcare insurance bureaucrats or the government bureaucrats.
Mm.
You know, in the 50, 60 years ago, it was the decisions of your healthcare were made by you and your doctor or provider. Didn't have a lot of providers back then. They just had physicians. So there wasn't a lot of nurse practitioners and PAs and people like that. But so there's something a little more pure and a little bit, I think, better about that kind of health insurance than there is kind of the large bureaucratic healthcare that we have today.
Okay. Well, I think that answers all my questions. So, I've been with Dennis Stewart and really appreciate his time and appreciate documenting that part of history for me.
Yeah, no problem. I think that's just kind of my lived experience. I lived it, and I was there.
Yes, appreciate it.